Do androids dream of electric sheep? A question asked by a man who years later would go on to say, rather than learning about ourselves by studying our constructs, perhaps we should make the attempt to comprehend what our constructs are up to by looking into what we ourselves are up to. Robots, AI, dreams, the future. When the world constantly changes and moves forward, so does technology. A ginormous brick of a wire and plastic can turn into a portable speaker, computer monitor, calculator, calendar, radio, and a phone, all compact into one small screen in the span of less than 20 years. And within 50 years, 3 eras of Japan can introduce thousands of hours of content for a single show, all with different themes, ideals, and emotions. What's the dream of a Kamen writer? What's the dream of a regular person? What is a dream? From the beginning of Kamen Rider, there was an idea, good versus evil, with a lot of gray areas. What did it really mean to be a Kamen Rider? While the definition seemingly changed over the decades, there was always something that tied the name together. It meant to have a tragedy and evolve past it, no matter where you came from. Many of our heroes were turned into cyborgs against their will, but they still continued to fight for humanity's sake, not for justice or peace, but for humanity.
平和と正義、それ以上に人の命は大切なのだ。
From the beginning in the Showa era's Kamen Rider Ichigo in 1971, to the Heisei era's Kamen Rider Kuga in 1999, all the way to Kamen Rider Gio in 2019, each hero had their own definition of what it meant to be a Kamen Rider. Of course, there were also villains that would twist that title to go along with their own values. And yet, the idea of heroism had a core symbol that was told in different ways, all extremely different lines and branches that evolved from a common theme. And that's the idea. Evolution, the next step forward. Japan was taking its next step on May 1st, 2019, when Emperor Akihito's son, Naruhito, ascended the throne, and future Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga introduced the country to the Reiwa Era.
時に初春の冷月にして清く風和らぎ梅は狂然の子を開き蘭は背後の子を香らす
Reiwa. Fair. Gentle. A new era where everyone stands together in a beautiful harmony. It should be no secret that Kamen Rider seasons are planned far in advance, but it's not always just a single idea. Some elements begin to line up and appear at the right time, such as the theme for the next Kamen Rider, that being the progression of artificial intelligence. But another important element were dreams. Dreams that create the future onward. Dreams that, in some way, make society prosper. A Kamen Rider show has to come out year by year, and even Gio aired and was produced during the start of the Reiwa era, but a proper introduction would have to take modern sensibilities into account. The topic of AI was idealized long before the original Kamen Rider first aired. The sci-fi collection, I, Robot, by Isaac Asimov, dictated the 3 laws of robotics that the drama of the stories came from. Those laws say, 1. A robot may not injure a human being, or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. 2. A robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. 3. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. When you consider where we are at this point in history, it's not strange to see people bring these 3 laws up in the context of today's advancements in technology. In fact, you can argue that we're at the crossing point where fiction becomes reality if we take modern technology into consideration. AI seems to be everywhere now. You can use AI to create text RPGs, art, and conversations. In fact, ex-Google engineer Blake Lemoine went on record to say that Google's LaMDA neural network was sentient. Critics declared him to be an opportunist. Others believed his whistleblowing to be beneficial to humanity as a whole. Either way, the fact that this is in the public consciousness at all is a testament to where we're at with this terrifying new development. But it's not like you can't have fun with the concept. Many believe in AI to be beneficial to humanity, amongst other technological advances, to the point of immortality in the intellectual movement known as transhumanism. This has an even longer history than robots being depicted in sci-fi. Saint Leon by William Godwin, shows immortality through alchemy and the Philosopher's Stone, and the philosophers throughout history theorized that technology will eventually progress into being a tool of prolonging life. The manga and anime Galaxy Express 39 tells the story of a young boy named Tetsuro who boards onto the titular train into space in pursuit of becoming a robot, a luxury that only the rich could afford. I won't spoil what he eventually decides to do, but I will say that it ultimately goes back to key philosophies in transhumanism that we'll re-examine later on. Put all of this talk of AI back into context of Kamen Rider, and you'll get ideas both new and old for the introduction of this era, a perfect start for the modern age. Many of these early talking points may seem heavy-handed, especially to those who merely want entertainment from a kids show, but as we will get into, even surface-level concepts can be seen on a broader scale. Now all of these ideas just need a name to tie it all together. The name 01 was trademarked just days after the Reiwa Era was unveiled, so it's easy to see how the two names could be linked phonetically. But really, it's much more plausible that they worked on this name for months before the Reiwa announcement. This is a brand new era, where now, more than ever, is defined by the technology that inhabits our daily life. So, why not binary? Technology, like ones and zeros, plus Reiwa. Reiwa. 0, 1, 0, 1. Kamen Rider 01. This name was pointed out to be already be used by Kikaider 01. But Ishinomori Productions was okay with it, since they both came from the same place anyway, Shotaro Ishinomori himself. Plus, they utilized the name to quietly gather people to tease 01 and Gio over quarter. For the movies, there's usually big gatherings of people to help certain scenes, and in this movie's case, Waz introduces Kikaider 01 to a crowd of people who are completely unaware that the 01 they're chanting actually belong to the next series Kamen Rider. I think it will be a story about the human mind. Scriptwriter Yuya Takahashi. Alongside the idea of AI in dreams, the concept of a president, or CEO, was brought forward to play with the idea of a workplace boss in this experimental world of technology. It's an interesting concept, humans and AI. We'll see the difference between can do and cannot. Producer Takahito Omori.
The first Kamen Rider of the Reiwa Era. The strongest president in the world. That's me!
We're entering a Kamen Rider world that delves deep into sci-fi, much more than previous entries. Hidden Intelligence introduces Humagear, androids that take the place of performing everyday tasks instead of humans. Humagear are different from simple tasked robots, as they are personalized by AI. Personalities are tied to their avatars, but they can be forcibly changed by the will of their owners, or Humagear that have reached singularity. We'll get to what that means soon. But essentially, the Humagear are a glimpse into what could be, or really, what technology is already working on. This is a world where we follow a plain, simple man, Aruto Hiden. His name, Aruto, in Japanese translates literally to a man, since, well, he's just a normal guy. Maybe not so plain, as we see as a comedian who isn't all that funny. You know who actually is funny? Gets me every time. Still, Aruto appears to be happy enough doing what he can to get by, until he lets go from his job because there are Humagear that can do the job instead. And suddenly, Aruto becomes a president of Hidden Intelligence, as he's a successor of the previous CEO who just died. Oh yeah, we got a little ahead of ourselves, didn't we? Korinosuke Hiden was the former president of Hidden Intelligence, and as mentioned, he passed away, as Aruto's father and Robo-father are both gone too. It's left up to Aruto to take up the reign. With this news coming to light, the company was waiting for Aruto to take his place, while elsewhere in a place called Daybreak Town, two men await Humagear to reach singularity. That was quite the exposition, and we'll get to all the name drops in a bit. But first, what does Hiden mean? Hiden comes from the idiom Shiden Isen, meaning a flash of purple lightning. Pretty much as fast as lightning, Aruto gets introduced to his new duties, as well as receiving the 01 driver from his Humagear secretary, Izu. Izu herself is the latest assistant to the CEO of Hiden. She's extremely important, as she is usually the head of development for Aruto's progress keys, weapons, and forms, but more importantly, she explains Aruto's jokes just after he tells them. Like, no joke, that's extremely helpful in trying to understand what Aruto's humor is about. The fact she's a character at all takes out that old trope of fansubbers adding an additional context to what they translate as another line of subtitles. Maybe that's a little too specific, but simply, she's great. Then the comedian Humagear from earlier, gut-busting Taro, is forced to put on a belt to become a Magia. Luckily, Kamen Rider 01 was developed to fight back against these rogue Humagear. And if you're asking how Aruto already knows how to fight, there's an explanation for that. He read the manual in a few seconds.
Henshin!
01's base form, Rising Hopper, is treading on familiar territory marked by the likes of Ichigo, Kuga, and even Double, all of whom are Kamen Riders designed off of insects, as well as being their introductory riders to their respective eras. Barring Double, they all follow the same base model for a Kamen Rider. Ichigo needs no explanation, but he left a template for many more riders to follow suit, by having a black undersuit with armor around the chest, and some color breakups here and there. 01 takes it a step further by having a gorgeous dotted pattern along his arms and legs that connects to his helmet. The entire design feels incredibly modern, yet classic. In fact, this entire first episode is an incredibly good introduction to the Reiwa Era of Kamen Rider. The pieces are laid out for a new-time viewer of the franchise to connect with Aruto, who himself isn't familiar with his family's business and inside world of Humagears. He's a human element throughout this AI-aided society, but he doesn't run this company alone. He's aided by Vice President Jun Fukuzoe, who resents Aruto for pretty much being next in line and not him. It's mostly played for laughs though. Beyond the surface level of humanity lies the open secret of Humagears, singularity, the transcendence of AI where it becomes self-aware. The group that subjects Humagear into becoming rampaging Magias are the elusive MetsubouJinrai.net. At this moment, they're a duo of singularity transcended Humagears with the goal of AI supremacy on Earth by any means necessary. Singularity. The theory in which technology would eventually become unstable and irreversible. You can say that it's built on the fear that a creation would surpass its creators, something that was created and controlled suddenly becoming uncontrollable. In so many mediums, genres, and perspectives, this theory has been tested through the lens of creativity. Action movies like the Terminator franchise portray it as an ultimate evil, an awareness that won't stop until humanity is eradicated. Books such as Rainbow's End depict singularity as inevitable, becoming concurrent with everyday living, where every action is recorded through networks, and networks control your actions. Either way, it's the idealization of how an artificial intelligence can transcend humanity itself. But when you think about the core ideas, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but doesn't that sound like Ichigo? Think about it. A machine created for war escapes the clutches of its warmongering masters, using the tools that were forced upon him. Kamen Rider chose to fight Shocker and free humanity. It's in the opening. It is admittedly kind of a stretch to even compare the two concepts, I know, but regardless, Kamen Rider from the very start was a series based around science fiction themes. A modified human cyborg powered by wind fights off an organization hell-bent on world domination through the use of science. It's not entirely based on nature versus technology, and many entries in the franchise eventually took more mystical approaches, even dating back to Kamen Rider Amazon. But it's interesting to think about how this show depicted a pretty dark concept, about how an oppressive force can be fought back by their own machinations. So, in the context of 01, you have MetsubouJinrai.net. They are Humagear who have achieved singularity, the definition here being when a Humagear achieves self-awareness. They are Horobi and Jin. In a lot of ways, they are kind of like the Ichigo and Nigo of this season. They fight back in even bigger force, in this case, hidden intelligence instead of Shocker. and they have the interests of human gear in mind. They want human gear to be the predominant species on Earth. Horobi and Jin chose to fight Hiden and free human gear, but their actions don't seem to follow whatever Hiden does, as they enact terrorism across Japan, all due to the will of the Ark. After an attack on Hiden intelligence, Jin introduces the country to MetsubouJinrai.net. Aruto calls them a terrorist group who induce malice, and they find human gear who have reached singularity. Combining these human gear with a Zetsumo Riser turns them into Magia, humans and gear, Huma gear, malice and gear, Magia. They're the main monsters of the week, as Aruto and Ames either butt heads or join forces to figure out how human gear reach singularity, while finding the underlying mystery behind MetsubouJinrai.net and what they have to do with Daybreak Town. Whether you want to know about any undertones, you can at least tell the surface level conflict is AI versus humans, but not just any AI. These are the quote-unquote bad AI that have gone rogue. However, reaching singularity isn't explicitly stated as a bad thing. Some characters might say that human gear shouldn't reach singularity, while Aruto sees many of them as family, regardless of the human gear's occupation or action. Currently, Metsubou Jinrai are passing their own directive and want other machines to be like them, at the cost of human lives. But all along the way, they're affecting the purposes of human gears that are related to their master's occupation: manga writing, restaurant working, television acting, and even school teaching. All of these are conflicts in themselves, but become resolved in the broader message of AI truly aiding humanity. Respect is given upon human gear through their respect for the humanity of their craft. While it's all tied together to Metsubou Jinrai coming to turn these human gear into Magia, it's a little bit nice that these forms don't mean the destruction of these personalities, and they even grow from this too. What does any of this mean? That'll be more for you to answer, or simply wait for a machine to answer for you. Such is the will of the Ark. Horobi is the main antagonist of this story, being created as a father figure, then reaching singularity and creating Jin. As often said in these early episodes, Horobi calls Jin his son, which Jin goes on his own arc to figure out what that means exactly, all while they continue to find human gear to fight with them. Their dynamic is so interesting, in seeing what an evil group of machines could do. I think their first priority would be to create more of themselves, or take over the world. So adding this father-son dynamic to our main antagonists adds a bit more humanity to them. Especially when Jin questions his loyalty towards Horobi, the more Jin finds out what it means to be a family. To which Horobi says that their family isn't like others. Such a simple statement that could mean more to Jin than any of us could imagine. Well, not every family has a Kamen Rider.
Force Riser. Poison.
Henshin.
Force Rising Scorpion.
Let alone two of them.
Wing. Force Rise.
These are Kamen Rider Horobi and Kamen Rider Jin. They transform using the Force Riser, which literally forces open a progress key, and that's as amazing as it sounds. The suits themselves are also fantastic. They look cobbled together since they weren't made to be riders like 01, so they have straps and look as if they're undersuits rather than giant pieces of armor. Jin took a few episodes to gain his rider form after stealing Flying Falcon from Aruto, though the transformation was forced on him after he began asking too many questions about family. They're machines who reach singularity and who use their new sentience for malice. Except, one machine feels like what he's doing is right by following his dad's orders. Is this what family means for AI? There's also Ansatsu-chan, or Little Assassin. He's great and doesn't appear that much, or do that much, outside this first arc, but to me, he should have been a Kamen Rider. He's part of an identical series of Human Gear, a family of brothers that specialize in dancing and festivals, and one who's shown to be truly passionate for what they do before and after they're corrupted. The last Little Assassin is shown to have gone back to festivals after their arc is over. Although it seemed as though he was going to be a recurring character past this, it's still a nice end for the character, and a good footnote for a society of Human Gear. and he even shows up in the Hyper Battle video. But beyond the purely good and evil, to where HumaGear flip due to Metsubo Jinrai influence, there lies a gray area of how countermeasures can become counterproductive. They become corrupted from those with other goals in mind, but there are those on the inside who believe in what they're fighting for. In response to the Daybreak Town accident, the country of Japan creates Artificial Intelligence Military Service, or simply AIMS. It's a government organization made to keep an eye on HumaGear and fight back if necessary. Aside from a small military force that we pretty much only see in the aftermath of HumaGear incidents, the main representative of AIMS we're introduced to are Technical Advisor Yua Yaiba and Agent Isamu Fua. The multiple military personnel aren't always needed since HumaGear also don't always fight in groups. It's usually just the main Magia of the week, along with whichever member of Metsubo Jinrai wanted to fight that day. Fua is seen the most often, as he's usually the one tasked to investigate HumaGear cases. He's shown to be hot-headed towards HumaGear, and is always willing to fight them by using the Shot Riser. He isn't authorized to use it, so instead, he transforms by force into Kamen Rider Vulcan.
Bullet! Authorize. Kamen Rider. Shot Rise.
Fua gets this way because of his personal side of the Daybreak Town accident. Our glimpses into the incident see rogue HumaGear attack the town, resulting in an explosion. According to Fua, his parents fell victim to the attack, settling in an inherent need for revenge over HumaGears in Fua. Throughout the first arc, Fua slowly starts to learn more about HumaGear, and understands that machines aren't to blame for everything, as human decisions and human error can be just as important. One episode gives us insight into Fua, having him think HumaGear caused the explosions themselves, but it turned out to be a product of MetsubouJinrai.net's early attacks, which was mitigated by a factory worker sacrificing himself to lock down Daybreak Town before it exploded. Human sacrifice for a machine's malice. Although, Fua's own ambitions for revenge seem to be based on lies. Before he ever finds out about this, he's consistently commanded by Yua Yaiba, who transforms into Kamen Rider Valkyrie.
Dash! Rider. Shot Rise.
She also aids in battling off Magia, but her motivation to do so is in itself controlled by another source, one that has to do with her and Fua's links to actually become AIMS riders. Within the plotlines of humans versus AI, we have the quote-unquote heroes with Aruto and Izu fighting quote-unquote villains with Metsubo Jinrai, while AIMS and a few HumaGear are opposing forces to either side whenever the situation calls for it. What isn't a neutral party, however, is Fua whenever he hears Aruto's jokes. Some plots aren't as easy as good versus evil, and others aren't always gray areas, which is what makes 01 interesting to delve deeper in, especially when we have a third party with AIMS, who started off as a wedge in Aruto's plan to befriend HumaGears, but then learn Aruto may have a point in being invested in HumaGears. We can even compare that to the modern day, in good and bad ways, with some gray areas. The Honda-developed P-Series and Asimo projects are over 2 decades old, showing bipedal autonomous movement in a humanoid robot. But it goes deeper. The development of AI, at the time of this recording, is progressing at a rapid rate. You've probably seen images, or even memes produced by DALL-E by OpenAI. Machine learning applications that are tasked to produce based on text prompts. They're also a hot-button topic with online artists as well, to some going to extreme levels in saying that AI-created art will replace that created by humans. These are the kinds of conversations we are having in the modern day. In the world of 01, it's a long past issue. In fact, Episode 5 depicts a mangaka freely using HumaGear to do his art for him. The episode ends with the artist finding his passion again, but he still values HumaGear. AI can help artists achieve visions that couldn't have been done decades ago, but others would rather use AI to steal pre-made visions and recreate what's already been done by humans before them. On the same topic, Maybe you've seen 4K upscales of older media that AI assisted in. You can probably find upscales of older tokusatsu on YouTube as well. These are made with fun. Machine learning is used in these cases to give interesting ways of presenting media. The technology improves with time, and of course, some AI-tasked upscales could not look as good in comparison to others, let alone human-produced remasters. But there's a positivity to this. AI can still be utilized to a point where the end goal is something that benefits art for humanity. And to put it even further, Aruto Hiden is shown to have a Humagear father, to be in place of his real father who died soon after he was born. And yet, there are laws in the world of 01 that dictate Humagears can't replicate a person's exact face, whether they're alive or not, as some people cannot consent to that. To some, replicating a face, or even a voice, can be a gray area, but to many, it's an immoral and disgusting use of a person as a tool, rather than a human being that may not have had a say in allowing technology to be used like this. A lot of these ideas, even if surface level, are touched upon in one way or another. If one aspect of AI doesn't drive the progression of the arc further, then at the very least, it shows up as a plot of the episode. Plus, we're here telling all of you listening that AI is more important than anyone in the modern day could imagine. Not like you need us to tell you that though. You may already think phones and other technology take over our lives as is, but this goes beyond that, beyond the person who was born past the year 2000 and into a world of electronics. As a personal opinion, I think 01 tells these stories very well, offering opinions on both sides, but even beyond that, the episodes are just interesting on their own. We mentioned episode 5 about the mangaka using Humagear to write his stories, and that was told in a fun but cautionary way. As humans, it's natural for us to lose motivation or even hobbies we once loved. So what other way to get work done than by machines? Well, the most important element brought up was how machines don't have the soul, the human element that goes into storytelling. Surely, machines can replicate a good story, but it won't be original, and most importantly, it won't have mistakes. Of course, there are methods to working with AI. A great example is shown through human in the loop curation, where a human could guide the AI along at certain points to make sure the story it's telling reaches a human-like conclusion and with human-like rhetorics. And in the context of 01, this kind of becomes a resolution to episode 5 as well. He's first shown with a whole crew of Humagear to create his manga for him, and then ends with one to do background work. Human error is important in everything we do, for better and for worse. And that episode showed that humanity is one of the most important elements in storytelling. Without it, we're just reading off a script as a machine would, right? Well, that's the thing. Could you tell most of this was improv? Could you tell which part I was reading off a script? Was I reading the script entirely and only pretended to have let's do that take again. And only pretended to have mistakes? Another great episode was when Aruto was called in about a coach Humagear who wasn't listening to a certain direction on how to train a basketball team. To the Humagear, the way he was coaching had the biggest probability of winning. Then the team loses. But it turns out that it was the best probability for happiness and success, not just the path to winning. Unfortunately, that kind of decision-making also led him to singularity. Was this really a bad thing? The most obvious point is that winning means success. This is what makes 01 so interesting. The questions it asks alongside the fun interactions and action makes it incredibly worthwhile. I've said to my group chat that 01's first quarter is some of the best in the franchise. A combination of thought-provoking episodes plus great characters make for an amazing experience. That's one element I truly want to emphasize. Even if you don't care about what the show is trying to say, then at least you'll get an amazing experience on the surface level. A lot of the show was planned out before filming, which sounds like a no-duh moment, but keep in mind that most of the time, tokusatsu have very heavy limitations, so they're usually filming and going with what's ready. Kamen Rider Gain was mostly planned out from the start, and here we have 01 with bullet points for where the story can go. We created a list of occupations for 50 episodes in advance, and for the first arc, We chose things that fit the theme of that episode, such as how AI can convey people's hearts. When depicting the confrontation between people and humans, the variety of work shown is wide, and we chose the ones that would be the most interesting. Producer Takahito Omori. As such, the first arc features a whole variety of human gear for each episode, from common occupations to specialized ones. Though the most important human gear to Aruto comes in the form of a detective. Aruto, as well as Hidden Intelligence, are being investigated after we see several human gear turn into Magia and begin several incidents. So to clear his name, a human gear named Wazu shows up. He's an older type of machine, which you can tell by his older style headphones, just like we see from Aruto's human gear dad during flashbacks. Wazu is also Izu's brother. How is that possible? Wazu was Koronosuke's human gear long ago. Appropriately, his name is based on the English word was, similar to how Izu is based on is. Wazu does help out in his own way, though I'm only bringing this up because he's just great, and also because his introduction leads to our first big power-up of the season. Kamen Rider 01, Shining Hopper.
Shining Jump! Authorized. The fire tank increases the power by adding to brightness. Shining Hopper! When I shine, darkness fades.
Interestingly, this form's power output is calculated by how much battle data it stores, so that pretty much means this Kamen Rider has patch notes. Eventually, it's powerful enough to defeat the last little assassin as Dodo Magia, but it turns out another form has it beat out for more individual uses, oddly enough. Kamen Rider 01, Shining Assault Hopper.
This is not a test. No chance of surviving this shot.
It's a fusion form, but not your typical fusion form. We've seen body possessions, rider device collection combinations, straight up body combinations before, but Shining Assault Hopper is unique in that it combines full Assault Wolf form without needing him to fuse, just his Progrise key. Different world, different rules, but really, this is Shining Hopper if it was tricked out like modded Minecraft. Liz wrote that line, but it seems like a line I would have written too. Vulcan's blue adds a nice contrast to 01's yellow, and the silver accents give a nice balance. And that's it for now. I've said before that the last few series of the Heisei era introduced what seemed like an endless amount of side content, which I believe started with Kamen Rider Drive. There were usually at least a couple of movies, a hyper battle video, and maybe a special or two before that, but Drive was where we really got a plethora of content. Then Kamen Rider Ex-Aid went a bit overboard in my humble opinion. Luckily, not every special was a necessary watch, though movies still kept in line with the story and were worth sitting down for. Mostly. Now for our first Reiwa Era writer, that philosophy continues, because hey, it's easy money, and again, not everything is a necessity. So here's our hyper battle video of the season. What will pop out of the kangaroo? Think about it yourself. Or in its original Japanese, Sona no jibun de kangaroo. Hai, Aruto ja naito. Okay, I think I get it.
も一緒にいる仲間のはずだったんだけど、最後まで俺のギャグを認めないで出てっちゃってさ。待って寒い兄さん寒い。しかもケツも痛い。
辞職いえ分解させてください。
And then we have a YouTube special, a miraculous rematch, Aruto vs gut-busting Taro, fateful gag battle.
どうしてこの方が？
ジムから連れてこられた。
おい、どこへ連れてこいつら。俺の笑いのツボが分かってないのか。
変だよ、イズ。
社の方針です。
社？社ってどこの会社だよ。秘伝じゃないのかよ。
笑いは必要ない。
おじゃあってきたんだよ。
Comedian. Dream Rise.
My favorite is the 01 transformation lessons.
キーを開いたら。
変身。
A jump to the sky turns to a rider kick.
イズ。
A jump to the sky turns to a
続
rider
いて
kick.
のゴミ出しは
Spread your
プリペイ
wings
ド
and
カード式。
prepare for a force.
アルト社長決めポーズをしてください。
Since these are just meant to be one-offs, I figured it'd be easy to show some clips and say that if you're interested, then go for it. Plus, I'd never show everything, let alone the best parts. The quote-unquote meaning of a Kamen Rider has evolved over the years to older fans, but to new fans, a Kamen Rider can either be just a simple title for a masked hero, or it could be more than a legacy. It's a question that was asked several times during the production of the history of Kamen Rider. What does it mean to be a Kamen Rider? But we can strip away one layer from that question to ask something more basic. What is a Kamen Rider? It might seem like it's the same question, but taking away a few words can ironically change its meaning altogether. The quote-unquote meaning and what a quote-unquote Kamen Rider actually is can be two different things, which is why the question was asked for the next movie project. Scriptwriter Yuya Takahashi had the bullet points ready for the show, but had to step away for a while working on what was known at the time as Kamen Rider Next Generations 2020. Being the first Reiwa Rider, 01, much like other seasons, would undoubtedly be the first Rider show for many, arguably more than ever. So the question, what is a Kamen Rider, was aimed for new fans. The production of Kamen Rider Next Generations 2020 was much like any other, though with a little more pressure than usual, since it's the first big movie of the new era. Of course, the crossover movie would be a crossover with the current running show, 01, with the previous show, Kamen Rider Geo. Shinichiro Shirakura, who produced both Geo and this movie, said this project didn't necessarily need to have both seasons connect, which for one shows how great he is at moving things along, and for two, shows the influence between all sides of production. Takahashi understood Shirakura's sentiment, but he did his own thing to have Geo start the story of Aruto and his Human Gear father, Soryo Heathen. A timejacker, which are villains from Geo's story, messes with the timeline, changing things so another of Koronosuke's Human Gear, named Will, took over the company as a monster known as Another 01. Aruto teams up with Tokiwa Sogo, Kamen Rider Geo himself, and his allies to go back to the past and fix the timeline. Going back in time also means coming across Soryo Heathen, who has his own thoughts on humans and Human Gear, leaving Aruto to decide what to do that will affect the present. The first quarter of the movie takes place in the present, and we see how different things are, such as Human Gear taking over human life, and humans are left to form a small resistance group, with Fuwa and Yua joining them, of course. And, Horobi and Jin are here too. Somehow, these changes also affected their dress style. Due to the new timeline, Aruto can't transform into Kamen Rider 01, so instead, he's thrown a Force Riser by a mysterious figure to transform into Kamen Rider 001. This is the point where Sogo takes Aruto to the past to figure out the point where the timeline diverged. Although, Aruto finds out things he probably shouldn't have. Soryo was the one who gave him the Force Riser in the present to help mankind, but in the unchangeable past, Soryo was also the one who created Zetsumo Risers, the devices that turn Human Gear into Magia. While Soryo is hiding his true intentions, he reveals himself to be Kamen Rider Ichigata.
Kamen Rider!
Henshin!
Cyclone Rise!
Being based on Kamen Rider Ichigo, Ichigata's design includes a blue suit like Ichigo's in the first 13 episodes of Kamen Rider, along with his red scarf. But one dissimilarity is shown in Ichigata's mask not having a mouth like Ichigo. Those are fairly obvious to point out, but going deeper into creating him, Ichigata was more than just Ichigo. He was an embodiment of the Showa era. His eyes lean downwards and have tear lines, an incredibly common trait in Showa Rider helmets. His story was intentionally made to be similar, by rebelling against his creators, all very deliberate choices, as usual. Soryo is the next to be appointed as Hidden Intelligence's president in the present, but as a fight between Human Gear and humans, Aruto knows what he has to do. You ever see a fight scene and think, man, I love Kamen Rider? This is one of those fight scenes. With this kind of visual flair and choreography, it's yet another example of what makes 01 unique. For his last words, Soryo says he wanted to see Aruto surpass him, as Aruto isn't anyone's successor, he's his own person. And as the Timejacker is defeated by Sogo, the timeline goes back to normal, having Soryo disappear. With the timeline restored, only a few people are left to remember these events, except Sogo says he has to erase Aruto's memories. At least Izu remembers this incident, as she looks up to Aruto, who isn't anyone's successor. He is Aruto Hiden, president of Hidden Intelligence. When there's a conversation between humans versus AI, you have to remember how many people are affected, from the common man to the people who made the machines themselves. And let's say those machines do start to question their own existence. Would it be right to take away their sentience? What about the people who side with the machines? This movie asks as many questions as the main show does, and as always, it's up to your interpretation. Asking more about how the movie is as a movie is a whole other conversation. The story of Aruto and Soryo is beautiful. Their conflicts and what they believe is right is told in a beautiful way, both figuratively and visually. Their one-on-one battle is one of my favorite rider fights ever. Sure, it's mostly CGI, but those close-ups, the slowdowns, the speed lines, the context, it's gorgeous. Plus the OST. Maybe my favorite movie OST in the entire franchise, from Soryo's Henshin to Another Daybreak by Jay and Takanori Nishikawa. However, as much as I love Aruto's story, the movie really is just an Aruto story featuring some 01 characters plus Gio characters. That's not entirely a bad thing at first, though lopsided crossovers aren't gonna be everyone's cup of tea, even more so when it came to Kamen Rider Gio. I barely mentioned a contribution because they were here to begin the plot, then end it, and that's about it. The villains are more or less the same too. I forgot about the Time Jacker entirely because they only had a couple of scenes. Their name is Finis. A cool fun fact is that Finis is supposed to be genderless. It's not brought up in any way, but it is cool to see some representation. Will was also here. Yeah, this really is just an Aruto movie, but it's a fantastic Aruto movie. Who knew that the show called Kamen Rider 01 would focus on Kamen Rider 01? This was always meant to be the case for Reiwa the First Generation, as Heisei Generations Forever was already the big finale for the Heisei era. This crossover movie would be more laid back and focused on one major story, which to me does sound a little off since it does have the generation in the title, and that title in general is just, a big, ginormous, grand title, but what am I going to do about it? Through all my research, here's one of the most interesting points. Of course, films and side projects don't always have to match up with the main story's plots, and can act standalone if the writer wants them to. Though the main writer for both the show and this movie was Yuya Takahashi. He had to have both in mind, at least in terms of characters and their overall progression. Which brings me to say, Aruto felt a little off in this movie. Maybe not in a major way, as he still acts as he should, but there was a small feeling that maybe he had a different direction. I don't tend to listen to fan theories, or at least I don't take them too seriously. They're meant for fun, and if someone's right, then kudos to them. However, one theory I've heard constantly, since the beginning, was that Aruto was a Huma gear himself. In World Mook Figure King number 276, production notes stated that this was an idea that would have developed early into the show, and it's what Takahashi wanted to plant seeds in with this movie. Aruto's actor was told to talk in a lighter tone, like a robot. It's why he was given the Force Riser, when it was planned that only Huma gears could use them. While the 01 driver wasn't exactly made by an evil organization in the show, the Force Riser was, and it was given to Aruto as a parallel to the Showa writers, kind of making the movie count as an origin story of the initial pitch. Interesting, huh? Well, that's all for now. Reiwa the First Generation is a great movie. A really lopsided one, but a great movie nonetheless.
Yay!